It's 7 in the morning on the coast of Georgia, the Black Sea looking beautiful. The beach is already getting busy here, and we are leaving the beach. We're heading back to Tbilisi. Okay, I'm back in Tbilisi, and I'm back in my little studio by the window. And today I kind of wanted to talk gear because I feel like I haven't talked gear a lot, and I think the reason I haven't talked gear a lot is because I don't think gear matters as much as most people do. And I do think it does matter. Gear does matter a little bit. It matters enough that every now and then we should talk about it. So today I'm going to talk about it. Today I'm going to talk about the age-old question of should I upgrade my camera? Should I upgrade my camera? I get asked this question all the time. Every time I do a Q&A, for example, I always get one person at least, usually a half dozen, who ask, what should I upgrade my camera to? I'm shooting the Canon 200D, for example, and I want to upgrade it, but I don't know what to upgrade to. And I think that it's an important question to ask, and also probably one that maybe you're not ready to be asking if you're asking it that way. So I want to discuss today, should I upgrade my camera? Not me personally, but you guys. Should you guys upgrade your cameras? And I want to just dive into talking about this. And I kind of surveyed my Facebook group as well to kind of get some answers on this or some questions on this. And yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. And before you decide to upgrade your camera, I want you guys to start thinking, why? Why do I need to upgrade my camera? What's my reason for upgrading my camera? And that's what I kind of want to dive in today, because I think that the vast majority of people who answer that question answer because I want to take better pictures. And that's the wrong answer. If you're answering because I want to take better pictures, you don't need to upgrade yet. You probably have some work to do. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm about to blow your mind. The only time you should ever upgrade your camera is if you're limited by something that your camera can't do that you need to do. That's the only reason. The only reason to buy a new camera is for that reason, or if you broke your old one. But there's so many other reasons that people give me for why they want to upgrade their camera. So I kind of want to talk about those things because I do think it's interesting. I do think it's important. For one, I get a lot of people that answer the question, should I upgrade my camera, with the question, I want to be taken seriously. And I kind of get this point. Especially if you're a professional photographer or trying to be a professional photographer. Perception matters. How people see you as a photographer is important, especially in getting work. The vast majority of people that hire photographers aren't photographers. They have no idea what photography gear is. So when you rock up using a big camera and a big lens, they go, oh, that person knows what they're doing. And to give you a bit of an example, my sister is a wedding photographer and a very good wedding photographer, and you should check her out on Instagram by not clicking here, but by following, this Instagram handle and going and checking her out. And for years and years and years, she shot 5D Mark III, then 5D Mark IV, all the best lenses, and she wanted to switch to mirrorless because it's lighter and easier to get around, and in many cases just as good of a camera. But she didn't do it because of perception, because she would walk into a job and it was hard for people to take her seriously if she had small gear hanging around her neck. They expect you to rock in with a big camera and a big lens. And in many industries, word of mouth is so important. So for example, in the wedding industry, my sister shoots a wedding, does a good job. A lot of the clients are the people watching there. They're thinking, who was that person that shot Jimmy's wedding? We should contact them to see who it was that shot the wedding. But they only really want that person if they saw them looking like a professional photographer. If they see them walking around with a point and shoot or just a smartphone, they're probably not going to want that person. Even if you can take incredible wedding photos with a smartphone, as Peter McKinnon recently showed in a video I'll link somewhere up here. Perception matters. But even my sister has changed because the perceptions have changed in photography. People are now more educated on camera gear, so you can kind of get away with shooting something like, you know, a mirrorless camera. In fact, my sister has switched to I think she's on the Fuji X-T2 or whatever it's called, and it's a great camera. Another anecdote, I was in Antarctica on my first ever job, and I was shooting a Canon T2i and a 70 to 200 f4 non-IS. That was the only gear I could afford for this job in Antarctica, where I'm taking pictures of penguins and landscapes and everything that's incredible there. And there was another guy on the tour, and he was shooting a Canon 1DS Mark III, I think it was, and he had a 400mm f2.8, also by Canon. And the first half of the trip, I just assumed the guy was a professional photographer. I just assumed this guy must be like for Nat Geo or something like that. And then about halfway through the trip, I was sitting in like the lobby area of the boat doing some photo editing, and he came up and sat next to me and he looked at my images and he said, "Wow, I should have bought the gear that you have." And I just looked at him and I was like so confused, and I was like, is this guy serious? And then he brought his computer over and all of his images were like shot f22, they were shot the wrong shutter speed, there was a lot of blurry, the composition was terrible, and I realized he was just a rich dude that had money and bought the gear that he thought would be needed for that job. But it doesn't matter if you don't know how to use it. And I guess that's the other point, is that as important as perception is, as important as it is for clients to see you with the right gear and think, oh, this person's gonna be able to do the job, it doesn't matter if you have that right gear or not, if at the end of the day you take the pictures, you send them to the clients, and they're unhappy. Because if that happens, you're not gonna find more work beyond that. So as important as perception is, what's much more important is actually delivering good images. The other answer I used to get a lot that's starting to be less of a thing is people always used to say, I want more megapixels. They wanted more megapixels. Everybody's obsessed with megapixels. And it's almost the trap that camera manufacturers tricked us into for so many years, as the only thing they were upgrading on cameras was the megapixel count. But the reality is, after maybe like 12, 16 megapixels, it doesn't matter. That's more than enough. And you also have to start thinking, what am I shooting for? What do I need the megapixels for? Am I shooting for an IMAX movie? Am I shooting for billboards? And the chances are you're probably not, especially this era in digital media where you're probably shooting for people to view on laptops or TVs or things like that. And let me kind of break this down for you to kind of like show you that you don't need megapixels. The front camera on this Google Pixel 2 is 8 megapixels. 8 megapixels is enough to print in good quality, meaning like over 80 DPI, a print that's 2 feet by 3 feet. So you can basically print this big by this big, I guess, more or less, and the image is still totally sharp, no pixelation, no issues at all. You could probably even blow that up to like 3 feet by 4 feet and still not really show pixels. And that's just the front camera on this phone. That old Canon T2i I had, which is now like maybe a 10-year-old camera, had 12 megapixels, which is the same as the front camera on the Pixel phone. And with 12 megapixels, you can blow up to 40 inches by 60 inches. That's massive. That's enormous, and still get the good quality. And that's a 10-year-old camera. The 5D Mark IV, which is filming this, shoots, I think, 30 megapixels? Let me check my notes. 30 megapixels. I don't even know how big you can blow that up to, but it's more than you'll probably ever need. In fact, megapixels matter so little that I didn't even know how many megapixels my camera shot until I did the research for this video. Megapixels don't matter anymore, because every single camera now produces enough megapixels that you can do whatever you want. And the other thing with the megapixels that people don't realize is too many megapixels can actually be a problem if the sensor's too small. If the pixel density is too big, it can cause issues with dynamic range, for example. So too many pixels can be a problem. Megapixels should never be the reason for you upgrading, unless you're shooting on a phone right now and maybe you want to blow things up bigger, or if you have a job that requires you to shoot like, you know, for IMAX. So I asked the Facebook group, what are your reasons for wanting to upgrade your camera, or what were some of the reasons that you gave yourself before upgrading your camera when you did it? And by far and large, the answer that people gave was that they were missing features on their current camera. There was a lot of people saying things like, I want a touchscreen, I want dual card slots. And I think that these really aren't things that will improve your photography. And in my opinion, the only reason you should ever upgrade your camera is because you're wanting to improve your photography. So if you're going for features, I think you're falling into the trap of camera consumerism. And yes, these features are great. I love them on my 5D Mark IV, absolutely love them. But I went with this old camera, my old 6D, for like 5 years because as much as those features are nice, I didn't want to spend $3,000-$4,000 upgrading my camera so I could touch the screen at the back. It's not worth it. That being said, once your old camera dies, as my old 6D is starting to really get old, it might be worth to get those features in the future. But don't fall into the consumerism idea of needing to always upgrade to get the newest features. And video. I was actually shocked in the group how many people mentioned video upgrades as the reason for upgrading their camera. Video was one of the bigger reasons I went with a 5D Mark IV, just because I love the time-lapse feature on the inside. Video is the reason also, though, that I went with the 200D, one of the cheapest DSLRs in the market. So video is a good reason if you're, I guess, shooting a lot of video. But again, in video, especially with camera gear, a lot of times it's not about upgrading, it's about moving sideways or down. M50 is a great camera, very affordable. The 200D, very good camera for video, also very affordable. So maybe don't think so much about upgrading as trying to find the camera that suits your needs best. So I kind of want to get back to the first reason that I mentioned. The reason of, I want to upgrade my camera so I can take better pictures. There is a right answer there. That's not always the wrong answer. I can't always say, hey, if you're saying I just want to upgrade my camera to take better pictures, it means that you're not good enough photographer yet. Because there is reason there. I think maybe some of you are just saying it wrong. If you're saying, I want to upgrade my camera to take better pictures, what maybe you're meaning is, I want to upgrade my camera because I'm limited by my current camera, and that's a right answer. But there's absolutely no point in upgrading your camera if you don't know what you're missing and how you're limited. So I always recommend to people, shoot your current camera until you know what's limiting you. If you're going out and shooting astro and just being like, I can't get these stars without there being a massive amount of noise, then maybe that's time to start thinking about upgrading. Or if you go out and shoot a concert and you're like, I can't get these images without getting a ton of noise, that might be another reason to answer. Or you're going out and shooting like some urban architecture or something like that, and you're like, wow, the distortion on my crop sensor is just massive, I need to upgrade. There, we're starting to get into some real reasons. So I'm gonna go back to my notes and I'm gonna go to some of the limitations that people have given me, again, in the Facebook group, that I kind of disputed a little bit. One of the reasons somebody said they wanted to upgrade was they wanted more depth of field. They wanted to blur out stuff in the background. But I think a lot of people actually confuse their need to upgrade their lenses with the need to upgrade their camera. If you're looking to get blurry background, out of focus background, bokeh, it's your lens. It's not really your camera. And yes, on full frame you do get a bit of better bokeh. Peter Piper picked a pet. You get the point. You get better bokeh on a full frame, but really not that much. So if you're looking for bokeh, you're looking for a blurry background, go out and get a 50mm f1.8. They cost like $120, and I've just saved you $3,000 from upgrading your camera. You'll get that blurry background that way. The other limitation people said quite a bit is my camera isn't sharp. I'm always surprised by this, and I see this all the time in the field. I see people with 5D Mark IVs or even 1DXs and with tripods that can't support them, with flimsy little tripods that even a little bit of wind rattles, and of course you're not getting sharp images. The tripod is what you need to upgrade more than likely if your images aren't sharp, especially in landscape photography or long exposure photography in general. Don't worry about upgrading your camera until your tripod is good enough, or that you're not locking up your mirror or turning off your image stabilization on your lens or shooting with a timer on long exposures. Your problem more than likely isn't sharp pictures, because this $500 camera, the 200D, it takes photos that are sharp as hell, as long as you use it right. By far, the limitation most people talked about was noise. They said, when I shoot stars, when I shoot low light, My images are just too noisy. I shot that Canon T2i for like 2 years when I started, and then I upgraded to a 60D for another 2 years, both crop sensors. And I'm really glad I did, because it kind of forced me to be like a technical beast, if you will. I had to shoot landscapes at ISO 100 or 200. I had to find ways to be creative, or else my images weren't right technically. I had to expose 100% perfectly, or else I would get noise. I think camera technology has made a lot of photographers, a lot of new photographers, kind of lazy, because now the gear is so good that you can fix so many issues. I'll give this example that's not fair to my buddy Curbs, because he didn't really like, it wasn't his intent to shoot it wrong. It was a dark image that we played with in Patagonia. So my buddy Richard Kirby shot this image out in the field in Patagonia, and he shot it ISO 100, 30 seconds at f2.8, and the image came back black. It was just, there was nothing. You could see a couple speckles of light, but it was black. It was 5-6 stops underexposed. There was nothing there. But we took all the sliders just for fun in Lightroom, and we went +5 on the exposure, and we went plus whatever on the shadows, and we played around with it a lot, and we had an image that was exposed properly. And old cameras, like a lot of old crop sensors, they would have never been able to do that. The shadow recovery, first of all, wouldn't have been there. And even if it was, it would have just been noise. It would have just been a bunch of, a bunch of grain. But on the Sony a7 IIIR, or whatever it is, it was brought back, and it was a usable, sellable image, and it was mind-blowing to see that. But it's also dangerous, because as a photographer, you can get lazy about not worrying about shooting things 100% correct, because you can, fix and adjust things much better on these bigger cameras. So I think that really you should get as good as you can with a smaller crop sensor camera, and then when you're totally limited and you can't do things that you want to be doing anymore, then it's time to upgrade. The other one I found quite curious is a lot of people saying, I want more frames per second. And I think that this comes down to the same discussion I talked about video, in that sometimes you actually need to make a sideways movement in your camera purchases, or even a downgrade. For example, if I was shooting my 6D, which I believe shoots like 4 frames per second, I wouldn't want to be shooting sports with this, just because it's not fast enough. It doesn't shoot enough frames per second. But I would have been totally happy shooting the 7D Mark II, which is actually a lower camera, a crop sensor camera. It was lightning fast, had great autofocus, had a better autofocusing system in general, and it shot like 10, 12 frames per second, something like that. So I think the most important thing to take away from this video is don't worry about upgrading your camera. Ask yourself, what do I need in a camera? And then searching out a camera that suits those needs. If you're a sports photographer on a budget, the 7D Mark II is a much better camera than the 6D Mark II, which is a much more expensive camera. So the kind of thesis statement of this now very, very long video is that you don't need to upgrade your camera. In fact, most people that upgrade their camera probably shouldn't be upgrading their camera. But you guys might be looking at me like a little bit of a hypocrite, because I did upgrade my camera. 8 months ago, I went from the 6D to the 5D Mark IV. But the truth is, I wasn't gonna upgrade. I was gonna go from the 6D to the 6D Mark II after using this camera for 100 years and just wearing it to death. I was gonna go sideways. I was just gonna upgrade to the newer version of it, because honestly, the features in the 6D Mark II were exactly what I needed. I was scared away by the reports that the dynamic range on the 6D Mark II weren't even as good as the dynamic range on the 6D Mark I. So I went to the 5D Mark IV so I could get that dynamic range. I shoot a lot of colorful images. I shoot a lot of images with filters. I'm trying to save as much light and dynamic range as possible. So I couldn't have that loss of dynamic range with the 6D Mark II. So I upgraded because I was limited by the 6D Mark II. And the truth is, I think that other than that dynamic range, the features are basically the exact same on the 5D Mark IV as the 6D. In fact, from the 6D Mark II, I really wish I had a flippable screen on the 5D Mark IV. So there's actually things from the lower camera I wish they had in the 5D Mark IV. So for me, it's not about upgrading. It's not about shooting the absolute best camera. It's about shooting the one that works best for me. There's a reason why guys like me and a lot of landscape photographers or a lot of travel photographers or a lot of photographers in general don't shoot a 1DX, because we don't need it. I have no need for the features of a 1DX. There's nothing in the 1DX that I'm like, I wish I had that. So why would I spend an extra $4,000 on a camera just because it's an upgrade? I'm gonna bring us back now, wind this all up by just saying finally. There are only 2 reasons to ever upgrade your camera. The first being you broke your other one or you used it too long and they no longer produce it, so you need to go to the newer camera. And the second reason is that you're limited by your current camera. There's things that your current camera can't do that another camera that's upgraded is able to do. Those are the only 2 reasons ever why you should upgrade your camera. And yes, there's arguments to, I want to buy the absolute best camera because then I want to learn how to use it. And that's fine too if you have the money. If you have the money, go crazy. I know lots of hobbyists they buy gear because it's fun, because they don't have money issues and they like new gear and it's fun to play with new gear. And I get that as well. Whenever I go out in the field, the hobbyists always have the nicest camera gear. In fact, on most of my workshops, the participants have way better gear than the actual instructors do. So I get that side of things too. Sometimes you just need to upgrade gear because it's fun and because you can. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I think the last thing I wanna say is don't forget about glass. If you were to say, Brendan, we can give you a 1DX with some pretty average lenses, or we can give you a 6D Mark I with just the best glass, I take that 6D Mark I every single time. Glass is more important than the body, and I think that's just something you need to remember. And maybe that's a discussion for another day. What camera lens should I buy? So maybe we'll do that next month. And before I wrap it up, I should mention that I'm now, for the next at least couple weeks, maybe even month or so, I'll be taking Tuesdays and Fridays off. So we're gonna go down to 5 videos a week. Sorry about that, but it's just, I've been doing too much office work recently to film every day. 5 videos a week, and they should be fun. I'll see you guys on Wednesday's episode. Peace.